Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Cass. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna draw a super juicy pear, so let's rock and roll. Make your first drawing in graphite, and once you're satisfied with all of your lines, blot it really well with your gum eraser to take any excess graphite off. Then we'll make a first wash. We're gonna use three basic tones for this: a lime green, a blue gray, and an orange. Block in a thin wash of the lime green all over the top part of the pear, working your way down. Then the blue gray is going to be on the bottom right hand side, and the orange on the bottom left. When all is said and done, this orange is not going to show up on your pear really, it's just going to give a slight warmth to that area of the pear. I use a little bit of this orange on the top left of the pear as well. Don't be afraid to use complementary colors to create warm neutral tones. That dark area on the right hand side of the pear is created by the leaf casting a shadow. So here I take more of my lime green color and I'm establishing the mid-tones all over the fruit. I paint right over top of that orange and right into the blue-gray on the side. I mix some of this blue-gray into my green color and create a darker tone. And I use this to block in that shadow on the right-hand side of the fruit. Try to resist the urge to blend too carefully here. Use a stippling motion with your paintbrush. That'll help you achieve the texture of the pear. This fruit is shiny, but its skin is not evenly smooth, and so that shows in the texture. So show that texture by developing layers and using a stippling motion with your brush. Leave little paler green gaps in between your dark green. Don't try to blend everything and block in super carefully. Just draw in areas with the tip of that round brush. That's one of the things that these round brushes are wonderful for. By the way, the brush I'm using here is a brand new brush, but it is a very cheap brush. I bought it at Walmart in a kit with 4 or 5 other brushes, and I paid like $9 for the whole thing. So you can make a drawing like this with just about any kind of brush. Yes, try to get the best quality things that you can, but do not be discouraged if you have poor quality tools. You can still make art that makes you happy, even if your tools are not the best. Later, when you have better tools, you will only appreciate them more. Here I'm taking more of that dark color that I've mixed with my gray-blue and my green, and I'm going to reinforce that shadow all along the length of this pear. Again, short stippling brush strokes. I'm not filling in a solid area. I'm going to use layers upon layers of translucent stippled color to build up the depth of tone here. In the end, I want this shadow to be really nice and dark and deep, and I want the shine on the pear to be almost white. I'm going for a very high contrast here. You see, I've also darkened the bottom left edge, which would have a slight shadow on it as well. To give the midsection of the pear here more definition, I'm going to use that dark colored wash and come right across the top of the pear's shoulder. That's gonna help define the shape of this object. Here I'm taking a little lemon yellow and I'm just blending into the edges of my shiny area, making them look nice and golden. Now I'm gonna clean my brush and get some nice grass green. Another layer on the shadow on the bottom left. And then back over to the right and start reinforcing the shadows over there. I love this vibrant green, it's so beautiful, but you have to be careful you don't use too much of it, or you'll end up with an evenly pea green pear, and that's not what we're going for here. I like to use a lot of colors to develop tone, but you have to be careful that you don't use too many on top of each other or everything will look homogeneous, which is the opposite of the effect I'm going for here. See how the texture of the skin is really starting to develop with those layers of stippling? I love this effect, and I encourage you to use a loose, relaxed method like this in a lot of different kinds of painting. It's forgiving, it's gratifying, and you can find that you really can develop a lot of different kind of textures without using a more precise method. Practice relaxed brushwork in daily exercises, and your work will improve every single session. Here I'm just using more nice dark green in my shadows, pushing everything back that needs to be pushed back. As I need to, I mix some dark brown and some dark blue into my green tones to develop varying dark tones. Here I'm just gonna clean up this bottom left edge. I can see that it's gotten a little sloppy down here. I need to fix that. At the same time, I'm gonna take the opportunity with my dark colors to darken up the shadow under the bottom of the fruit as well. Now for the leaves, what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna use a really cool color for the leaf because I want the pear to look really nice and warm. So my pear is a yellow-green and I'm going to use a blue-green for the leaf. In reality, the leaves of pears are a cooler green. They're not quite as blue-green as I'm going to make them, but I'm going to use a little creative license here. So I make a thin wash of like a seafoam green color all over the surface of the leaves, but very, very, very pale. Then while that dries, I'm going to take some dark brown just on the tip of my brush, and I'm going to fill in the stem area. I'll give more definition to this area later on after the first coat. I want the leaves to dry before I go adding any more color to them. Here I'm going to clean my brush and go back to the bottom and start adding in some of my dots with my dark green color. Pay close attention to the distribution of the spots on the pear. Trying to replicate the distribution pattern is something that will make it look really convincing and lifelike. I'm using both a dark brown color and a dark green color to draw in the dots on my pear. While I'm working on 80 million spots, my pear leaves will be drying and getting ready for the next wash. And some more dots over here. Don't forget about the shiny areas as well. It's true that you see fewer spots in the shiny areas on the pear, but you do still see some, particularly around the edges. So don't ignore those places. You'll notice that there are no places on the pear's skin that you can't see those little dots, so you really do have to be pretty thorough. You don't want it to look too uniform, like it was printed mechanically by a machine, but you do want to make sure that you get pretty much all the areas of your pear with those dots. Now when I'm finished here, I'm going to clean my brush up and I'm going to get a nice dark blue-green color and go back to my leaves. I'm going to start filling in those shadows. The leaves are pretty shiny, and so the lighter areas are going to stay quite light. There are a few areas on these leaves that are going to end up pretty dark, and they're going to need a few good coats of paint to be deep enough in tone. Pear leaves are not deeply veined, they're pretty smooth, so you're not going to see a lot of texture on the leaf surface due to the vein. Here and there you'll see a little bit, but keep it to a minimum because that leaf is pretty smooth. Make as many layers on the leaves as you need to. Let it dry, come back and paint over it, let it dry, come back and paint over it until you're satisfied that you've deepened the values enough. Here I'm going to clean my brush, I'm going to take that dark brown and I'm going to make my next layer on my stems. I'm not going to use any black here, I'm only going to use dark brown, but I am going to make that dark brown very, very, very saturated. In a lot of watercolor drawings like this, at the very end, the absolute darkest details, I like to fine-tune with India ink, but I'm not going to do that this time because there are not that many darks on this drawing, and I don't want everybody's eye to be drawn toward the stem. Well, that's pretty much it. I hope you have fun. Thanks so much for drawing with me again, and I'll see you all next time.